Well, after much debate, the Syrian National Coalition has decided it will sit down with the Assad government. That moment will happen when the two sides meet at the so-called Geneva II peace talks on Wednesday. The Syrian National Coalition has been bitterly divided on the entire process. Anita McNaught joins us now from Istanbul. Hi again, Anita. So was it a resounding yes to attend those talks?
Well, it was a resounding yes, but only, it has to be pointed out, after the many people who said they didn't want a bar of it left and never came back. So we kind of knew that in the lead up to a vote, if you looked at the numbers of people who we knew were pro-Geneva, they probably had it in the bag if the people who were refusing to go along with it didn't come back, and they didn't come back. The obstacle was more institutional, if you like, than political in the end, because they have a clause or an article in the Syrian National Coalition constitution that says they're not meant to sit down in negotiations with the Assad regime. Now, how do you get around that? Well, you get around it by saying it's just a sort of an executive meeting, kind of like normal business, and it's not something we need to change our constitution to do, which is just as well, because they would have needed a 2/3 participation in any vote and a 2/3 majority to pass it, and they certainly didn't have the numbers after all the withdrawals and the resignations to do something like that. So they must have had a long legally related wrangle to make those final choices, but in the end the vote was 58 yes, 14 no, with a couple of refusals and one white paper spoiled ballot, if you like. So they've got the numbers to go. The argument now is going to shift, though. It hasn't stopped. They're going to start discussing who gets to go, and that's going to get very interesting, because as we have discovered this evening, some of the other parties who've been deciding whether to give a green light to Geneva participation or not, namely the military groups, themselves are now asking to be represented on a team of only 9 delegates, and they want 5 out of those seats. This could get very interesting and very difficult again.
Okay, so still deciding who's actually going to go, who's not going, Anita, and how representative is this going to be of the opposition? Will this delegation be?
Well, brace yourself for exactly that question to be asked, and asked repeatedly. The people who decided not to participate in this vote in the end, and there were 44 of them, and there are resignations which may or may not have been related specifically to Geneva. But the major bloc, the withdrawal bloc, if you like, withdrew their consent from this process, because while they're not anti a peace process beginning, they felt that the guarantees that the Syrian National Coalition had always stood by, namely that this meeting would be about the formation of a transitional government, and only about that, were not being assured anymore. They felt the international community no longer stood behind them, that they had wobbled on that, and they felt that in going under the terms that were being offered, the Syrian National Coalition was walking effectively into a political trap. So they will say that this is a misconceived participation, and that it's not going to achieve what people hope it will achieve, and stand by for many people to say it's not representative. But even if all 121 members, as they originally were, or 120 or 115 members, were still not quite sure who actually constituted the Syrian coalition at the end of all of this process. There were many people who said that that body wasn't sufficiently representative anyway, so there were people on the outside who would have thought that no amount of voting with no degree of unanimity would have actually represented what the Syrian people felt.